Someone says something that strikes a nerve, and suddenly your body tenses, your breath shortens, your mind spirals into a storm of thoughts. That quick comment, that dismissive tone, that thoughtless action, and now your entire day feels derailed. Why do we give others this power? Why do their words ignite emotions we cannot control? Why do we find ourselves replaying conversations hours after they've ended, arguing with people who aren't even there? The ancient Vedic sages had a striking answer. What we perceive as external conflict is merely the outward manifestation of internal disharmony. In the Chandogya Upanishad, there exists a profound teaching, Tat Tavam Asi, that thou art. This isn't mere philosophy. It's an advanced psychological framework for understanding human interaction, one that Carl Jung would later echo in his own groundbreaking work. If you've ever wondered why certain people seem to have a direct line to your emotional circuit breaker, stay with me. Because this isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about achieving true freedom, the kind that no external force can disrupt. And if you're seeking that unshakable inner peace, that state where no one's words or actions can steal your equilibrium, subscribe now. This journey isn't about them. It's about you. Jung discovered what the ancient Vedic scientists had documented thousands of years earlier, that we don't see people as they are. We see them through the lens of our own unconscious. What bothers you about others is often a reflection of what lurks unacknowledged within yourself. The Bhagavad Gita explains this as ahankara, the ego's identification with its projections. When we believe these projections are external realities rather than internal reflections, we become trapped in cycles of emotional reactivity. Think about it. When someone's criticism stings, is it really their words causing pain? Or is it that they've touched a doubt you already harbor? When someone's arrogance triggers you, is it truly their confidence that bothers you? Or is it that they embody a boldness you've denied yourself? The Mahabharata recounts how even the wisest sages could be provoked to anger when confronted with qualities they had suppressed within themselves. This isn't ancient mythology. It's sophisticated psychological insight predating modern science by millennia. Jung called this mechanism projection. Vedic science named it pratibimba, reflection. The terminology differs, but the observation is identical. What triggers us externally corresponds to something unresolved internally. You don't get angry when someone insults a part of yourself you've fully accepted. You get angry when they expose a wound you're still carrying, a doubt you're still fighting, a fear you've been running from. Maybe they made you feel disrespected, not because they truly disrespected you, but because you carry an unconscious belief that you're not worthy of respect. Maybe they ignored your contribution, and suddenly that childhood wound of feeling invisible flares up like a dormant ember given oxygen. That's not their doing. That's your unresolved past speaking through your present moment. Anger isn't a problem to eliminate. It's a signal to interpret. It's not about suppression. It's about translation. When you feel that heat rising, ask yourself, what part of me did this moment activate? Why did I need this person to see me in a particular way? Why did I feel compelled to defend myself? Because when you excavate beneath the reaction, you'll uncover a narrative. And often, that narrative has nothing to do with the person standing before you. The Yoga Vasishtha describes how our minds create samskara, mental impressions from past experiences that color our perception of current events. Every time you're triggered, you're not reacting to the present. You're reacting to the past, to the parent who didn't listen, to the friend who betrayed your trust, to the moment you learned that vulnerability meant danger. So now you attack or withdraw or burn bridges, not because the present circumstance demands it, but because you're protecting a part of yourself that was never properly healed. Here's a truth that may be difficult to accept. Most people don't actually want peace. They want control. They want to manipulate their external environment so perfectly that they never have to confront the chaos within. But control isn't peace. Control is anxiety wearing a convincing disguise. Jung understood, as did the ancient Vedic scientists, that genuine peace doesn't come from avoiding difficult people. It comes from confronting the part of you that reacts to them. Once you understand this mechanism, anger no longer owns you. It becomes information. It becomes your invitation to healing. So the next time someone bothers you, ask yourself, what have they awakened inside me? Where have I felt this before? What story am I telling myself about this interaction? Because the truth is that no one has the intrinsic power to make you angry. They only have the power to show you where your healing work resides. You think it's them, their attitude, their tone, the way they dismiss your ideas, the way they always make you feel small. But Jung would stop you right there, as would the rishis of ancient India. The Mundaka Upanishad contains the image of two birds on a tree, one eating the fruit, the other observing. This is a perfect metaphor for human consciousness. Part of you is engaged in experience, while another part can observe the experience without attachment. When you're triggered, you've forgotten the observer and become only the experiencer. The reason certain people drive you crazy isn't because there's something fundamentally wrong with them. It's because they're reflecting something within you that you haven't fully acknowledged or integrated. Yeah. Perhaps you can't stand people who seek attention because you were punished for standing out. Maybe you're irritated by those who speak their minds because you've spent a lifetime filtering your truth. Perhaps emotionally expressive people make you uncomfortable because you've learned to equate vulnerability with weakness. The truth is confronting. You're not reacting to them. You're reacting to the part of yourself that you see in them, the part you've disowned. This is what Jung called the shadow, the aspects of yourself that were deemed unacceptable, that you were taught to hide, that you learned to deny. In the Vedic tradition, this concept appears as avidya, ignorance or misperception of the self. The shadow isn't eliminated when you deny it. It's merely pushed into the unconscious. And when you encounter someone who openly expresses what you've buried, something primal in you awakens. Let's say you pride yourself on being logical and measured. You've worked diligently to remain calm and analytical in all situations. Then someone appears who is passionate, expressive, perhaps even chaotic in their emotional display. Instantly, you feel judgment, perhaps even disgust. But here's the twist. It's not them you're rejecting. It's what they awaken in you, perhaps the memory of when your own emotions overwhelmed you, or when you were shamed for expressing feelings too intensely. Anger is unprocessed memory, and the people who trigger you most are walking reminders. You believe you're angry at this person, but in reality, you're angry at a younger version of yourself, the one who was never allowed to exist fully. Jung didn't teach avoidance of these triggers. Neither did the Vedic sages. Both traditions urge us to study our reactions to others because those reactions are the real classroom for self-knowledge. When you stop blaming external circumstances, you begin awakening to the truth. You realize the reason you feel powerless around certain people is that you've given them authority to validate your wounded parts. The reason rejection hurts isn't because someone said no. It's because you've built your identity on external approval. The reason criticism stings isn't because the words themselves are harmful. It's because deep within, you believe your worth is negotiable. So, how do you transform this pattern? You stop reacting and start reflecting. You ask, what is this interaction trying to teach me about myself? Where does this feeling originate? Am I angry because they're truly wrong, or because they've touched something vulnerable within me? Because emotional mastery isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming transparent to yourself, seeing through your own mechanisms with compassionate clarity. Jung believed, as did the composers of the Upanishads, that the shadow wasn't something to destroy. It was something to integrate into conscious awareness. And integration means this: when someone triggers you, you become curious rather than defensive. When someone disrespects you, you set a boundary without hatred. When someone leaves you, you release them without turning their departure into evidence of your unworthiness. That's genuine power, not the power to control others, but the power to remain centered regardless of what they do. Imagine this scenario. You're in a room with someone who used to ignite your anger instantly. Same behavior, same tone, same dismissive attitude. But this time, something's different. You don't react. You don't defend. You don't collapse. You observe them clearly, but more importantly, you observe yourself clearly. And the fire that once consumed you is absent, not because you don't care, but because you're no longer projecting your unresolved material onto them. You've made peace with the aspects of yourself they once activated, and now they have no leverage over your emotional state. This is what Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming psychologically whole. In Vedantic terms, it's similar to Atmajnana, self-knowledge that leads to liberation. You cannot become whole if you're at war with your own reflection. But the moment you stop blaming the mirror, you begin healing the image. In that process, anger transforms into wisdom. Imagine entering a situation that once would have triggered intense reactivity. Someone interrupts you. Someone contradicts your point without truly listening. Someone gives you that look, the one that used to set your nervous system on fire. But this time, there's no internal storm, no tension, no reaction, no hours lost to mental replays of what you should have said. You notice the behavior, but you don't absorb it as a personal assault. You're not cold. You're not suppressing. You're simply free. This is what Jung meant by integration, and what the Vedic tradition calls samatva, evenness of mind. Most people confuse peace with numbness, mistaking emotional detachment for spiritual attainment. But both Jung and the Upanishads teach that true peace isn't about becoming untouchable externally. It's about owning your internal landscape so completely, so consciously, that nothing outside has leverage anymore. You want to stop being triggered by others? You want to end the cycle of emotional hijacking? Then here's the fundamental truth. You cannot control the world, but you can stop making the world responsible for your sense of self. Anger isn't a character flaw. It's a signal from your shadow saying you've given someone too much power over your emotional state. And the way to reclaim that power isn't through control, but through integration. What does integration look like in practice? It means stopping the internal splitting of your personality. Stop being the perpetually nice one while burying your assertiveness. Stop being the perpetually strong one while denying your vulnerability. Stop being the perpetually rational one while suppressing your intuition. Integration means allowing your full humanity to exist, not for public display, not as performance, but as inner acknowledgement. It's when you no longer need the world to mirror your value because you've faced your own reflection without flinching. The Katha Upanishad describes this state as one where the wise one is no longer deluded by the pairs of opposites. You are no longer torn apart by wanting to be seen one way while fearing you might be another. If you want to be unshakable, begin by meeting the versions of yourself you've been avoiding. The jealous one, the insecure one, the one who craves validation, the one who feels inadequate. And instead of judging these aspects, hold them in awareness. Not to fix, not to change, just to acknowledge. Jung expressed this principle in almost identical terms to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Wholeness isn't achieved by removing parts of yourself. It's accomplished by bringing the disparate elements into conscious relationship. What makes you emotionally sovereign isn't an absence of wounds. It's that your wounds no longer dictate your responses. Someone can criticize you, but you've already made peace with your imperfections. Someone can ignore you, but you no longer equate attention with worth. Someone can leave, but you don't disintegrate because you've learned to stay present with yourself. Most people crave emotional invulnerability. They want a state where they never feel hurt, rejected, or misunderstood. They want to be out of the human condition. But that's not power. That's fear wearing a spiritual disguise. True emotional resilience isn't when you feel nothing. It's when you can feel everything without becoming identified with the feeling. You can experience anger without becoming anger embodied. You can feel hurt without collapsing into victimhood. You can be misunderstood without frantically trying to explain yourself. That's when you become truly unshakable, not because you're invincible, but because you're authentic. And authenticity, once established, doesn't waver with every external breeze. How do you reach this state? You stop asking, "Why are they like that?" and start asking, "Why does this still affect me?" Every trigger is a teacher. Every reaction is a map. Every moment of anger is a doorway. And on the other side is a part of yourself waiting to be acknowledged. People will always be themselves, some compassionate, some careless, some healing, some harmful. But once you've met your shadow, no one else gets to weaponize it against you. You own your story. You own your reactions. You own your boundaries. And when you truly own these aspects of yourself, you stop defending, stop chasing, stop explaining. You become as still as a mountain, untroubled by the wind. There comes a moment when the world attempts to provoke you, and you remain unmoved, not from passivity, not from numbness, but from freedom. This is the state Jung was describing, and what the Mandukya Upanishad calls Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. It's the moment when you've transcended mere psychological survival and entered psychological sovereignty. Let's be clear, this isn't about indifference. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming so centered in your authentic self that no one else can redefine you with their projections or expectations. That's the power you've been seeking. And it doesn't come from avoiding triggers. It comes from disarming them at their source. You're no longer reactive because you don't outsource your identity anymore. Others may misunderstand you, but you don't spiral into explanation. Others may dismiss you, but you don't shrink to accommodate their perception. Others may forget you, but you remain present to yourself. You don't react because you don't require anything from them to validate your existence. Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." The Bhagavad Gita expresses the same sentiment when it states, "You have the right to work, but never to the fruit of work." Both traditions point to the same liberating truth. When you choose to become whole, no one gets to define you again, not through praise, not through criticism, not through indifference. Here's where transformation becomes tangible. The very people who once triggered you begin to feel different in your presence. Not because they've changed, but because you've reclaimed the aspects of yourself they once activated. That colleague who used to undermine you no longer holds emotional power because their opinion doesn't anchor your self-respect. That friend who always dominated conversations no longer makes you feel small because you no longer need external permission to exist fully. That family member whose approval you craved no longer determines your mood because you've stopped measuring your worth through their eyes. You used to live in reaction. Now you live in relationship, primarily with yourself. And once established in that relationship, you're no longer reactive. You're responsive, rooted, present. You're no longer trying to protect an image because you've made peace with your reality. Jung didn't promise perpetual happiness. Neither did the Upanishads. Both promised wholeness. And wholeness means your anger isn't a problem to solve. It's information to interpret. Your discomfort isn't failure, it's feedback. Your triggers aren't enemies, they're messengers. And once you truly listen, they stop screaming for your attention. People will still judge you, still project onto you, still misunderstand you. But none of it adheres to you anymore because you're no longer defined by their perception. You've built something more durable, a self that doesn't need external management, a self that doesn't require constant validation, a self that no longer takes things personally because nothing personal can reach someone who knows who they truly are. That is the ultimate freedom, not detachment from life, but engagement without entanglement. Not indifference to others, but differentiation from their projections. Not dominance over your emotions, but discernment within them. You can enter any situation, encounter any person, hear any words, and remain centered, not because you've built walls, but because you no longer have leaks in your sense of self. Your boundaries are clear, your energy is self-contained, and your peace is not performance, but authentic presence. What if the people who hurt you were never your enemies? What if their words, their actions, their judgments were merely reflecting parts of yourself you had yet to acknowledge and integrate? Jung echoed what the Isha Upanishad had expressed centuries earlier. Until you make the unconscious conscious, external events will appear as fate rather than as reflections of your internal state. You thought your reactions came from others, their inconsideration, their ignorance, their hostility. But it wasn't them. It was your unconscious drawing you back to unresolved material again and again, until you finally recognized the pattern, until you finally claimed ownership of it. That's the paradox of emotional freedom. You stop being triggered not when people behave better, but when you stop deriving your identity from their behavior. The moment you declare, "I am not your perception of me. I am not your approval or rejection. I am not your presence or absence," that's when you stop flinching at external events. Because every time someone triggered you, they weren't revealing your weakness. They were illuminating your path, showing you the places within that were still fragile, still defined by past conditioning, still shaped by stories that were never truly yours. You thought strength meant never reacting, that if you could just remain perfectly composed, perfectly detached, perfectly unbothered, you would achieve invulnerability. But that's not peace. That's fear with excellent posture. True peace arrives when someone says something hurtful and you remain grounded, not because you're numb, but because you see through the interaction. You see their pain. You see your old wounds, and you don't get entangled in either. That's the ultimate realization. You're not here to defend yourself from the world. You're here to discover yourself through your interactions with the world. Every conflict, every trigger, every judgment that once made you question your worth, none of these experiences were meant to diminish you. They were designed to return you to yourself. Because now you don't need others to understand. You don't need closure from past hurts. You don't need to prove your point or be acknowledged as right. You've already chosen yourself. And once you do that, nothing else has the same grip on your emotional state. You move through life with a different quality of presence, not cold, not guarded, but clear. You can interact with people who once hurt you, not because the hurt didn't matter, but because you've made peace with what it awakened in you. You stop fearing rejection because you no longer reject yourself. You stop chasing approval because your worth is no longer externally sourced. You stop overthinking every interaction because your center is no longer negotiable. This is what Jung meant by individuation and what the Vedic tradition calls moksha, liberation from the cycles of unconscious reaction. It's becoming the person you were always meant to be once you stop becoming what the world rewards. And when you reach this state, something remarkable happens. You don't get angry, you get still. You don't get reactive, you get responsive. You don't carry grudges, you carry clarity. So if you're still watching, if this message resonates with something deep within you, know this. The fact that you've been triggered means you're alive to the process. It means you're ready. You're not weak for feeling deeply. You're powerful for facing what those feelings reveal. Because most people never undertake this inner work. They spend their entire lives blaming others for showing them their own reflection. And they die without ever truly knowing who they were beneath the reactions and defenses. But you're here, engaging with these ideas. And that means you're already changing. So now the essential question becomes, what kind of person do you become when nothing external controls your sense of self anymore? What emerges when you stop hiding behind composure and build your peace from authentic presence instead? If this video helped you discover that question, like it so others might find it when they need it most. And if you're ready to stop being controlled by external triggers, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't numb our awareness. We don't run from discomfort. We face our shadow and integrate it, one conscious breath at a time. And if this message touched something significant within you, leave a comment below. I am not reactive. I am rooted. Let yourself feel the truth of those words. Because from this moment forward, no one determines your emotional state but you.